We all know that we age. We're all getting older. But why is it? What makes us get older? Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Schimpff. This is part of a continuing series that I've labeled Aging Gracefully. Well, what does cause aging? Here's the short answer. Don't know. The longer answer is there's a lot of theories out there, a lot of work being done, and we'll look at some of those theories, but recognize that we don't have all the hard and fast answers yet. It's interesting, there hasn't been that much work in this field until quite recently. Most biomedical research has been on specific diseases like heart disease and lung disease and so on. But now, increasingly, there's efforts looking at the aging process. Well, if we could slow aging, could we get what's called a longevity dividend? Meaning that if the aging process is slowed down, would that also slow down the onset of these age-prevalent diseases like heart disease and chronic lung disease and so on? Or is it not really the aging that makes the disease occur, but rather it's our lifestyles? I think it's mostly our lifestyles, but I'm not positive, and it's probably some of both, actually. But in any event, that's the concept of the longevity dividend. If we can slow the aging process, we can slow the onset of these diseases. Now, it turns out if you're using lifestyle changes, as we've talked about, those lifestyle changes, we know, can slow down the onset of chronic illnesses, and they can also slow down that rate of decline of our body functions. So the two together work together. Well, there's a lot of areas of interest, and here's a listing of some of them. We'll touch on just a few. The first is telomeres. Telomeres are those ends of the chromosome. If I use this little example here of shoestring as a chromosome, it's DNA of the chromosome, and there are at the end of the chromosome these little protective caps. And it turns out every time a cell divides, that cap gets just a little shorter, like that. Well, as it gets to a certain point, that cell can no longer divide. So it gets a little shorter with each division, but that little bit that comes off at some point prevents the cell from dividing any further. And so the cell dies or becomes senescent. And a senescent cell we think of it as a non-functioning cell. Well, it really isn't, because it still makes some toxic compounds and puts those out that affect other cells. At the time of conception, this little thing is about 15,000 base pairs. That's DNA base pairs long. By the time we're born, there's been a lot of cell division, so it's shortened down to maybe around 10,000 base pairs. And by the time we die, it's down to about 5,000 base pairs. So the question is going to come up in a later video. Is there a way to lengthen that? Keep it going for a while? I'm not in a hurry, you know. Let's look at another area called epigenetics. Epigenetics looks at the DNA, and here's our DNA. So the epigenetic change isn't changing the DNA itself, but it's changing the outside here by adding something to it, a methyl group, it turns out. So these things occur during the course of life, and they build up along the DNA here, and it turns out that in so doing, it affects whether a gene that's on the DNA, say right in here, can produce the enzyme that or the protein that it's supposed to produce. And so these epigenetic changes can build up, and it's thought that by affecting some of the genes, that affects the process of aging. And I mentioned senescent cells before. Well, it turns out that they accumulate with age. And if you can remove them, as they've done with mice, for example, the mice start to get younger. They live longer, and their heart function gets better, and so on. So it's kind of exciting. The question would be, could you remove senescent cells from our bodies? And as a result, we would not only look younger, feel younger, but maybe live longer. Well, you know, it's a stretch, but that's one of the areas. So enough for this time. when we come back, I'll talk again about some other mechanisms that might be related to why we age.